How we end. That's the sermon title for today. So this is the last Sunday, believe it or not, of 2018. And so I was wondering how I was going to end the year, what kind of sermon that I would present to you for your consideration at the end of the On Ramp to Hope, which was our Christmas series. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and stay to the right towards ending and second chances. And that's what I'm going to speak about today, endings and second chances. As a matter of fact, that's my first point. You know, public speaking, speaking of speaking, public speaking makes it to the top of every list. Public speaking, heights and bugs. It makes it to the top of every list of the things that we fear. It seems that people would rather die than do it. And if that's you, if you have to do it, you feel like you just might die. And right there's the proof. Meanwhile, the people who do speak for a living and do it all the time, they always, almost always, want a second chance. Once the talk has ended, they become their own worst critic. It's like dying 1,000 deaths as their mind runs back over what they've just said, because they have invariably blurted out something that they now can't take back, or they have said this and they should have said that, and that's my Sunday afternoons. Oh my goodness, what have I done? What have I said? I heard this one guy who was a professional speaker say that he has had so many awkward moments doing public speaking that he should probably be in therapy. And he said, for example, he remembers that one time he was supposed to give a talk on marriage, and the only people that showed up was a divorced guy and his son. But he was on the hook, so he had to go ahead and do it, even though it had nothing to do with them. But he said probably the most awkward time that he'd ever had doing one of these speaking gigs was to speak at his own father's retirement. His dad was the pastor of the same church for 30 years. And he said, when those days came to an end, when his father's retirement had come to full fruition, on that day, that Sunday finally arrived, which would be his father's last one. And you know, this will happen to all of us, no matter what it is that we do. That last one, that last day, doing something will come for all of us. And he said, that day came for my dad. And he said, I'd never seen anything like this before, because at the time, he was young. And he said, we all marched into this big dark auditorium that majored in gloom. And it looks like a set from a Dracula movie or something. And that was his home church, and it was intensely intimidating. Lots of dark wood and high ceilings. You would expect to see gargoyles hanging over, you know, like this. And he said we had a number of hymns that we sang together, all in a minor key, so that we could keep it as sad as possible. And then there were several speeches by people that he said he didn't remember. And finally he said it was my turn up to bat. He said, so I'm wearing my blue suit with my yellow tie so that I can have maximum mojo over these people. And I walked up these curved steps to this elevated pulpit. Have you seen these elevated pulpits? That's to remind you that whoever's speaking up there is speaking from a higher power, and they're speaking down to you who are lower. And he looks out, he says, at this vast assemblage of about 40 senior citizens. That's all that's left after his dad's pastoral work with this congregation over 3 decades. And he says, turn back the clock 3 decades then to the 60s, and there's multiple services, full parking lots, there are crowds and enthusiasm, there's excitement, and now we're here. So many weddings later that you couldn't count them, thousands of hospital visits, and the last Sunday has come. And there's really almost no one left. Most of these folks, he says, look like they're about 100 years old. It looks like they could drop over right on the spot. I feel like I'm with the buffalo, he says, in the 1870s on the Great Plains, and they're all spiraling down to extinction. So I'm thinking, this better be brief. Let's get this thing going. And there's my high school debating coach with his wife right there where they always sat. And there's the pew where my 5th grade English teacher and her husband sat. She was so mean in class, he says. Now they're all dead. And there's the balcony where we used to play as kids during those interminable Sunday morning services. It's all empty now. There's no one there. And I'm looking down over these last few people that are still there after those 30 years. After all of that input, here's the output. A handful of elderly folks, all lovely people. And I'm thinking that they want me to give a feel-good talk in a moment that there's not very much to feel good about. And so because it's church, he said, I have 3 points. So long, so fast, and so what? And I don't think the talk did anything for anybody, because sometimes what you say is too small for the situation. Sometimes you're talking, but the situation is shouting, and what it's saying in this instance is, there's nobody here. Everybody's dead. You're preaching to 40 people and acres of dark wooden empty pews, creaking as we shift the weight underneath us, counting the moments until all of this is over. And he says when that was done, we all marched out and we went over to the multi-purpose room, which people in that denomination call the gym. And as we did that, we went over there to eat the ritual potato salad and wrap it all up. And then he said once we did that, we walked over to my dad's office and the phone rang, and it's the funeral director. And he's asking my dad to add one more to the tally of over 900 funerals that he had done in his career. Many people that had no one to bury them because they had no faith connection, no connection to a church. And so his father stepped up when they had no one else whatsoever. And my father, maybe, he says, for the first time in his life, said no to something, to that funeral director. We went home, got up the next day, first day of retirement, and the phone does not ring. And all the people who needed you, who hated you, who loved you, who were desperate for your attention, all those people who rang the phone off the hook for all of those years have now just moved on to someone and something else. And your phone is now silent. You know the great thing about a friendship with God is that through faith in His Son, Jesus Christ, you get to start over as many times in your life as you need to. And that is good news. That's a wonderful thing. It's like getting a C in your college Spanish course and then making the decision to actually attend class and your grade rises. It's a great thing. If you offend someone or disappoint someone, with God's help, you can go back to that person and you can make that thing right and you can go on with things. That's called marriage. If you have a terrible moment of stumbling and you fall flat on your face spiritually, if you do those things, that inside you just have this feeling of, oh, because it's off the cringe meter. And you know that you've colored so far out of the lines that you're not even in the coloring book anymore. And you're here and it seems like that God is 1,000,000 miles away. No matter how far away you are, You can always get a second chance in a friendship with God through faith in His Son, Jesus Christ. In fact, the Bible says that God's mercies are new every morning. That's in the book of Lamentations. Do you know what that means? It means that you can't live enough days to outlast God's mercy. If you live 20,000 days, His mercy lasts for 20,001 days. If you live 30,000 days, His mercy lasts for 30,001 days. If you would live 1,000,000 days, His mercy would last 1,000,001 days. Maybe that's what eternal life is like, right? Even if you did live that 1,000,000 days, His mercy extends. It's always just beyond what you could ever reach in your life. It's just new every morning for you and for me. And oh, man, I'm so glad that we can never get past that point where God's mercy has reached this end with me. And I trust that that's the same with you. Now, I could split theological hairs there, but I won't. But I will say this, that we get to start over. As long as we have breath in our lungs, we get to start over as often as we need. But you know, I think what that professional public speaker's dad's experience teaches us is that you get to start over as many times as you need. But you only get to end once, like his father. You get to start over as many times as you need, but you only get to end once. So the question then becomes, how are you going to end? Like with this year. And I don't mean how are you going to die. Do you know that there used to be a TV show called 1,000 Ways to Die? Never seen it. Don't go look it up. And, you know, I heard that there's a Facebook page. Also, do not look this up. It's called If I Die. If I Died. And this is what I found out about it. If 3 of your friends, your trustees, certify that you've actually kicked the bucket, you can have your last Facebook status posted on Facebook. Launched out to the world, exactly what we need, another message, communicating then from the grave, so to speak, your Facebook grave, you're able to give one last report on what you had for lunch the last time around. And you send that out to the world, and then, as far as Facebook is concerned, you're dead. Do not like that page. People who are thinking about this, though, and this kind of page proves it, they're thinking about death, or this kind of page would not exist. This week, I went to a website, deathclock.org. There's also a deathclock.com. I went to that one too, and I kept the same information on it, and every time I clicked it, it changed the date that I was supposed to die. So, you know, for what it's worth, I went there. It must be the gospel truth because I have the printout right here in my hand. Death clock, right? People are thinking about this stuff. And I discovered just a couple of days ago, I did it on Friday, that I'm going to die on December 29th, 2051. I have 2 different dates. 2050. I'm going to die on December 29th, 2050. At least that's what the website said, where I entered my height, my weight, my sex, male, which that's pretty much the end right there. My body mass index, I put all that in and I click the death clock button and bam. They give you the exact date, December 29th, 2050. And I can put that date in my phone and plan my Facebook final update. I have over 1 billion seconds, according to this, to live, and now one less, and now one less, and now one less. And I'm spending all of those seconds on you people, and now one less, and now one less, and now one less. maybe like the retired pastor, right? And the question of how I'm going to die isn't really the same question as how am I going to end? Because the question of how I'm going to die is a biological issue. It's simply that it's the cessation of the metabolic life in my cells and my brain stops working and I die. But the question of how I'm going to end is more about what all of this means. And it's bigger than just the question of what's on my bucket list. It's bigger than how can I extend the days of my life. It's a question of what has all of this been about. It has to do with meaning, how I end. Maybe, then, a reasonable way to approach that question of endings and second chances is by comparing a couple of people who had two different landing zones, if you will, two different endings in the Scriptures, two men that we know from the Bible. One of them his name is Judas Iscariot, and the other one's name is Peter. That's my second point, Judas and Peter. Now, they both had a great deal in common. Both of them were a part of the original 12 group of 12 that Jesus called to come close to him. They were his first group of really close followers. We call them disciples. They both traveled around with him for approximately 3 years or maybe a little more, walking the roads in villages all around Israel in first century times under Roman occupation. They both heard everything that Jesus taught. They both heard him say, "Blessed are the meek." They both heard him rebuke the religious authorities as whitewashed tombs, and worse, because he said worse to them. They both saw miracles. They saw dead people raised and lepers cleansed and blind eyes open. They saw Jesus feed thousands out of really just little fragments of food. They both saw all of that. And they were both right there with him until the end. And they both betrayed him. And they both, by the way, died a violent death. Now, we don't know very much, really, about Judas Iscariot. In recent times, more things have been uncovered about this man that have stripped away some of our presuppositions about who he is, and I won't go into all of that. But I will say that from Scripture, there's not a lot of commentary on his life because really not a lot is needed about him. Other than he was part of the group, that original group of 12, right? He was the treasurer of the group. We know that. And we also know that he was a thief, in fact. One of the New Testament accounts says, and gives evidence of this, of his compulsion then as a thief, where one day, there was a woman named Mary, and she was trying to anoint Jesus with some very expensive oil, symbolically preparing him for death and burial. And we know that story. And Judas, the thief, sometimes you can tell who's got the biggest problems because they complain the most. Judas, the thief, says, "Hey, we can't be doing this. You know, what is this lady doing? We could take this expensive stuff and we could give the money to the poor." But the gospel writer points out that the reason that he was saying that is because he was stealing the money. He didn't care about the poor. And the Son of God is a victim of embezzlement for 3 years. And you have to think, where is this guy's head? What's he thinking? He is stealing from the Messiah, not once, not twice, but for 3 years. And the reason that he wanted the stuff sold to distribute to the poor is because that money then would fall to him and he could skim some off the top, which was common and probably customary in that day for someone in his position. And well, frankly, it happens today too. This would enrich him personally, but it would deprive the poor and the other 12 in the group along the way. He was not a good man. He stays with Jesus through it all. He sees everything that Peter sees, all the miracles, all the healings, everything that goes with all of that. And at some point, his heart becomes so twisted and so dark that the gospel writers record that Satan takes over that piece of territory in his soul. And now he's more dark and more twisted than he had been. One writer writing well after the fact, John, says that he was full of the devil from the beginning. When it came to the end, he'd had enough. And as that end then approaches for Jesus' life, and it becomes clear that a confrontation is about to develop, the perfect storm of controversy with the religious and the political and the military authorities, they're all adding up and they're all pointing to Jesus and his dying a death on the cross, Judas goes to the religious authorities, maybe feeling the need to bail out before this whole thing craters in an execution. And he's telling them, listen, I'm willing to strike a deal with you, in which he will lead the temple police to an arrest of Jesus, probably hoping to force his hand, and then Judas will be the hero. Again, all self-involved. I'll lead you to him. I'll identify him in private, because if it takes place in public, the religious authorities know that there's going to be a riot, and if there's a riot, that brings the Roman military, the Roman army down on them, and that's not good for anybody. And so he's got to be arrested in private. And so what Judas will do is he'll go and he'll identify Jesus in private with a kiss, and in return, the religious authorities will give him 30 pieces of silver. In today's money, that's about the cost of one payment for a good used car. 1 month's payment on a used car. You have stolen on a regular basis from the Son of God, and now you have traded him in for a monthly payment on a Civic. When that fateful night comes then, Jesus has met with all of his followers for one last time, the Last Supper. It's a Passover meal. The Lord washes the feet of all 12, shows himself to be a servant, coming to surrender his life on our behalf. It's an illustrated sermon. As a matter of fact, that night is one illustrated sermon after another illustrated sermon about what Jesus is about to do. This is his last opportunity to speak to and to demonstrate what he actually came to do. And the disciples are dense, but he's telling them in all of these acts that he is the one that's coming, not demanding, but the one coming to offer his own life. And he washes their feet in the process. And when all of that's done and they're involved in the meal, Jesus says to all of them that one of the people in the room with me, you're going to betray me. Somebody who's sitting at this very table, you're going to betray me. And it's like one of those scenes, like that last scene in an old murder mystery, when the lead detective all of a sudden stands up. You know, I get a picture of in my mind of Columbo. And the person who is guilty is in this room. That's kind of what it's like in those moments. And the 12 go crazy. What? What? One of us? How could it be? Is it what? Is it him? He looks guilty. I've always wondered about that guy. Who's involved here? And Judas speaks up and says, Lord, is it me? And Jesus says, the person that I take bread and dip it and hand that bread to, that's the one. And he takes a piece of bread and he hands it to Judas. And he identifies him as the one who will betray him. And lights the fuse, which becomes the huge explosion that will take him to the cross. And the last words that they say to each other are Jesus saying to Judas, what you've got to do it quickly. And the gospel writer records that Judas went out, and then he puts down some chilling words for all of us to read. And it was night. It was night in that man's soul, as well as in the souls of everyone in that room, that someone so close would betray. They probably exactly didn't know, though, what was happening. After they sing a hymn, Jesus and his followers, then they go to a garden, as you know, outside the city, the walls of the city, and they want to have a time of prayer together. And in the quiet, they hear a group of people coming. It sounds like a mob, and they're carrying torches, and it's Judas leading the temple police. He walks up to Jesus, and the Lord says, will you betray me with a kiss, which is the sign of friendship in that world? And Judas kisses him, identifying him as Jesus of Nazareth, a political revolutionary, the threat to Roman power, the one all the religious authorities envy. The temple police arrest him. Judas is standing there like some confidential informant in a low-level narcotics bust. And off goes Jesus to a sequence of interrogations, beatings, illegal trials that would ultimately lead to his execution on the cross. I bet you didn't think I'd come to Scripture, but I don't just give motivational speeches. Matthew 27. When Judas realizes what's really going to happen, Matthew, another member of the original 12, records in the 27th chapter of his account of Jesus' life what took place at the beginning. Verse 3 says, that's where we're going to begin, verse 3. When Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priest and the elders. I've sinned, he said, for I have betrayed innocent blood. And listen to their response. What is that to us? They replied. That's your responsibility. That's on you. So Judas threw the money into the temple and left, and he went away and he hanged himself. Probably a more accurate depiction is he impaled himself. He suspended himself on a stake above the ground. Very graphic. He died a violent death. No matter how it happened, he died a violent death. The price of a payment on a used car wasn't enough to finance the remorse, the grief, the pain, the anguish that he carried at that moment in his soul. The religious authorities cared not even a little bit, and their answer was simply, that's on you. And they walk away from him. Now, Peter, he was also a part of that group, that original 12. He was a stinky fisherman, as you know, recruited by Jesus right from the shores of Galilee. He said, follow me from fishing to become a fisher of men, and Peter joined up right away. And you get the sense when you read the accounts of Peter's life that he never met a conversation that he didn't want to be part of. He had the gift of, and maybe you know somebody like this, he had the gift of blurting. Like, everybody talks, but some people just know how to blurt. That's Peter. And so whenever anything would happen, you get the feeling when you read these accounts of the Bible about his life that he would just say stuff because that's what he does. He is one of those, shoot first and aim later kind of people. And sometimes it helped him and sometimes it sort of hurt him, but that's who he was. He just blurted things out. And one day when the disciples were going out on that same Sea of Galilee where he had first been called, there was a huge storm. And they were all terrified. Where's the Lord? And they see Jesus coming. They don't know who it is. And he's walking towards them on the sea storm, which is now tossed by wind and wave, and they don't really know who it is because the superstitions of the day give a lot of different interpretations. They believe in ghosts. So they think it's a ghost coming at them, and they're all terrified. And when you're in that state, you really don't know what you think. Right? And so Peter just starts blurting. He's out of his mind at that moment, and which is almost his position, as you know, on almost everything. And he says, Lord, if it's you, tell me to get out of the boat. Now, who comes up with an idea like that? You're in a storm. You're in a boat. Yeah, it's sinking, but you're still in the boat. And you're suggesting to Jesus, please drown me. Ask me to get out of the boat, which is our only source of safety in this moment. And so Jesus gives the instruction for that to take place, and Peter jumps out, and all of a sudden, blurting is discovered to have absolutely no buoyancy. And he starts to sink. And the Lord finds him and elevates him. And then he pulls them all together. And he says, now, what has really happened here basically is, well, you don't have any faith. Let's try to come together and have some faith. Okay, guys? In another moment, Jesus, with Peter and some of the others, asked them, who do people say that I am? You know the story. And they started sharing different ideas. Some say that you're Elijah. Some people say that you're John the Baptist, who after he's been beheaded has now come back to life. Some people say this, some people say that, one of the prophets, blah, 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 blah. And Jesus presses them and says, but who do you say that I am? And Peter replies, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus looks at this man and says, oh, On this rock, on this profession of that truth, I'm going to build my church. That's one time when Peter got it right, and then the next second he blows it all over again. Now, with that in his background, it's not a surprise that when Jesus announces that his teaching career and his miracle-working career, his Messiah career, is going to end in an execution, Peter goes right to the blurt play, and he says, Lord, no matter who deserts you, I'll never leave you. I'm going to be with you to the bitter. Now, can't you tell that it's already going to turn out bad? You know, I'm going to be with you to the bitter end. It's like, now I don't know how it's all going to pan out, but this past week or maybe 10 days ago, our second very expensive coffee maker went out. Just like that. Well, it was acting up. You know, 10 cups became 5 cups and sometimes 3 cups. And then it just quit. I got a cup. Pam got up. Got a cup and it didn't work. She didn't even get a cup, matter of fact. She didn't work. Good thing I got a cup because I'm the grumpy one. And so, you know, we thought, well, we're going to buy another coffee maker. So we do something crazy and we go out and buy another expensive coffee maker, but not a 1 cup. Because I'm not buy one of those again. I've already said I'm not going to do it. Now, I don't know if I will, but if this coffee maker goes out, I'm telling you, I'm going to buy a cheap $9 coffee maker, and it'll die 1,000 deaths as far as I'm concerned. I'll just go out and buy another one. But in the process, you know, remember when sometimes you fail, you know, and then you get that second chance? We're looking for the receipt. I had this in my mind to tell you this story, but I didn't have any place to fit it. So I guess it's here, and I don't want to go too long today. But so you know, as a pastor, one of the privileges that I get as far as taxes goes, is I get to write off housing expenses from my taxes. That's non-taxable income for me. So a coffee maker is something that we've come to accept as necessary for life and putting a home together. And so throughout the year, I keep all of these receipts. Well, we had just purchased this coffee maker, and we were having everyone over for Christmas dinner on Christmas Eve to our house, everyone from my side of the family. And so we're doing different things, and I'm fixing a doorknob that needs to be fixed, and Pam gets in that box because now we've gone out to buy this coffee maker that costs way too much. And Pam is opening the box, and she's taking it all out, and I know that I saw that receipt for that coffee maker on top of that box because it sat there in our living room for like 3 days, waiting to be opened. And I know I saw it on there. And so it has a steel carafe. But when you have a steel carafe, it has no warming plate. That little thing that you set the carafe in does not warm. And Pam likes her coffee hot. And if she's going to spend that much money on a coffee maker, that coffee better be hot. It can always cool down, but you know, it's a little harder to heat it up. And so he said, boy, did we make a mistake. So we're looking for the receipt. Now remember, I take these receipts and I put them in a special place that I have, so that at the end of the year I can, or the beginning of the next year, I can, you know, compile them all and figure out what we spent on housing, and make sure that I'm okay by the IRS and everything. And so I know that I've seen that receipt on top of that box, and Pam's the one that took it out, right? So now we're looking for the receipt. And we're looking all over the house. Where'd it go? And I'm like, Pam, you took it out of the box. What did you do with the receipt? The last I know, I saw it on top of the box. So I am immediately not guilty. Right? So we're looking all over the place. And finally I go to the place where we put our receipts, where I put our receipts. And I look in there. And I know that when I just put the most recent receipts that are in there, I know when I put them in. So I go down that far in the stack, and I look through them, and it's not there. So I put those receipts back on top of the stack, and then we go around, and Pam's back in the bedroom by now, and she's looking for things in there and wondering, well, if I didn't try to get it out of the living room and just carry it back here temporarily, because sometimes I keep things back here, right here in this place, and I go back there, and I have to say, I'm just compelled. You know what? You want to know why men don't live as long as women? Because they have these stupid compulsions. And I have to say one more time, the last time I saw it, and what I'm trying to do at that point is I'm trying to say, let's retrace our steps. Well, she's already done that in her mind, I know. But now I'm trying to do it because nothing is ever settled until it's settled in my mind. You know how that is. I can't take anybody's word for it. And so, she, and I'm like, right back. And then we kind of go our separate ways, get out of the room from each other, like take my Christmas advice. If that, if you're getting ready to get in a political argument at Christmas, just go to the other room. So I go over, to the other room, and then she comes out of the bedroom and she goes into that same stack of receipts. And in 2 seconds, there it is. Aha, there's a receipt. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And at that moment, it ended well. But I felt like in my heart, and it was so genuine that I have a second chance now because I know how much my wife likes hot coffee. If she's going to drink coffee, she's not a coffee fan, but if she's going to drink it, it's got to be hot. She takes hot coffee and puts it in the microwave. So I say, I want to do something in return. Just a natural, genuine compulsion from my heart. So the next day I'm going to leave church early, and I'm going to go find this coffee maker. Now I've searched it out online, and I know the cheapest place to get it is at Walmart. So I go to 3 Walmarts, 2 Bed Bath & Beyonds, that's where we got the first one. Several stores, many miles. I go to Target, which I don't want to shop at Target. But I go over here and they have one on the shelf. Nobody else has one on the shelf. The same coffee maker with a glass carafe that will keep the coffee warm. I drive all the way up into Huber Heights, another Bed Bath & Beyond, Target right across the road. Oh, no, another Walmart, then another Bed Bath & Beyond, and Target is right across the street, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? I walk in, I go to the service desk, I say, do you do price matches? Yes, we do. I look up on my phone. It's cheaper at Walmart. I go back. They have one. I pick it up, take it back, pay it. I'm happy. I go home, and I get to tell my wife, I got a second chance at getting this thing right. Because that night, we could have coffee if we wanted. We could have something sweet from the multitude of Christmas cookies that she baked. We could have a cup of coffee together and sort of seal the deal. I got a second chance. How I ended gave me that second chance. And now we're happy. And so I was telling my brother-in-law about it on Christmas Day. Hey, we got a new coffee maker. And so he sends me a text the other day. He says, hey, we're out. They have it cheaper at Walmart. At Sam's Club. I'm like, what? It's cheaper at Sam's Club. It's $15 cheaper. But who cares? I got it right with my wife for me, blurting things out. Because I have the gift of blurt sometimes. I'm getting better. But yeah, sometimes I have that. Now I have no idea where I am in my notes. But I want to tell you that story. Because, sometimes how you end determines if you get a second chance or not. And everybody needs a second chance. And there's no doubt about that. So let me find my place. Give me a second. I really forgot. On this rock I'm going to build my church. Now, with all that background, it's no surprise that when Jesus announces that his teaching career is going to end in execution, Peter goes right to the blurt play and says, Lord, no matter who deserts you, I will never leave you. I'm going to be with you to the bitter end. And have you ever made a promise like that? Like my coffee maker promise, I promise. The last I saw it right there, I'm never going to buy another coffee maker because this thing is junk. Too much money on these 1 cups, even though they taste better. And there's Peter making a promise. Oh, there's no way I'm going to back up on this one. No, not going to back out at all. I'm totally down with this. Everybody leaves you. I'm going to stay. That's me. If you have to go to your death, I will go to your death, and I will die. We will die together, side by side. I give you my word. And later, Jesus would tell him, Peter, before the cock crows, in other words, before sunup, you're going to deny me how many times? 3 times. After his arrest, triggered by the kiss of betrayal by Judas, Peter followed along behind the temple police, who would be leading Jesus toward the end of his life. And when he's brought into one of the facilities where the authorities were meeting to begin his bogus trial, the Bible records that Peter came in with the crowd and he actually sat among the guards. And somebody recognized him. What? Weren't you part of his fan base? Weren't you with Jesus? And he said, no, I've never heard of the guy. I mean, I'm just here for the party. I don't know what's going on. I don't even know this guy. And then a servant girl speaks up and she says, oh, I'm sure that I saw you with him. I saw you with my own eyes, and I know what I saw, and you were with him. And Peter, with great vehemence, he says, absolutely. I mean, and then there's a lot of language, that maybe the guards weren't embarrassed by. It says he swears. He probably just swore on the name of the Lord or something like that, which is about the worst thing that a Jewish guy could do. He uses all of this language vehemently. I have nothing to do with this guy. I don't know who he is, but we know that you're from Galilee. We can tell by your northern accent. Like you're part of the northern aggression versus the southern rebellion. Just ask Roy Weiss. That was my first conversation with Roy, I think. Somebody from down south. He said, oh, the northern aggression. That's where you're from, huh? So he denies all this, and the biblical record says then at that point the cock crows. Peter hears, the sun is up, and he's overwhelmed by remorse. And the phrase that is used is, he weeps bitterly. Jesus dies for the sins of the world on the cross. There's confusion afterwards about what has happened. There are reports about a tomb being empty. Some say this, some say that. There are stories about angels and Roman soldiers and so forth. And they're trying to sort all of this out. The disciples are. And then Peter goes back to his default position and he blurts out at some point, I'm going fishing. In other words, let's go back to our old life. We're going to return to square one. We've tried this religion business for a while, and well, it was okay while Jesus was here. We had some direction. We had this great leader, but now he's gone. And so while we're still trying to figure all of this out and the status of things, until we really know, until all of the dust settles, I'm just going to go fishing. I'm going to go back to my former life. And they all go back with him. They all return to their previous life. Not that all of them were fishermen, but they would all be centered in about the same place. The only one who would be the outcast would be Judas, and he was probably from the south. The only one from the south, so they're all from that area anyway. They all go back, and they gather around the lake, as I'm going to mention in just a minute, and they go back to the Sea of Galilee, and they're fishing all night, and which is done by throwing huge nets over the side of wooden boats into shallow water, essentially pretty close then to the shore. And as they're involved in this fishing process, John, who was also at the Last Supper scene and one of the original 12, and maybe the closest person to Jesus, writes an account many years later of what happens in chapter 21 of the gospel that bears his name. And beginning in verse 4, this is what he says of chapter 21, the book of John. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore. But his disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they replied. He said, throw your nets on the right side of the boat, and there you'll find some. And now they're probably suspicious at this point because one time in the past, he'd said something just like this to them. They have already had this conversation. Cast your nets on the other side. So there they are, they're in the boat. Somebody appears on the shore, they don't know who it is. Hey, you guys have any fish? No. Hey, well, why don't you try throwing your nets on the right side? And so when they did that, they were unable then to haul the net in because of the large number of fish that they had caught. Verse 7 says, then the disciple whom Jesus loved, that's John, the author of these words, said to Peter, it is the Lord. And those 4 words in that moment changed everything. It is the Lord, not a tourist, not a fisherman, not a family friend. It's the Lord, the person that we're looking at, that's the Lord. And as soon as Simon Peter, who had just wept bitterly and said, I'm going to go fishing. When he hears that, as soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped in the water. And he swam to the shore. He's not trying to drown himself. He's not trying to commit suicide like Judas. It's that he can't wait for the boat to get back to the shore because he recognizes that it is the Lord. And he has to get back to him. He throws himself into the sea. He starts swimming like a madman towards the shore while everybody else is steering the boat back there, because it is the Lord in Peter's heart, in Peter's mind. And Jesus then, once they all get on shore, pulls them all together again, and over an open fire, he takes some of the fish that they've just caught and he makes them breakfast. He grills a fish breakfast for them. Those people whose feet that he had washed just a few days before, the people who watched him work these miracles, the people who had, by the way, deserted him almost in total during his crisis on the cross. And now he pulls them all together after appearing on the shore. They're back to their life. And instead of calling down fire and brimstone, he makes food for them. And then he takes Peter aside, and they have a private conversation. And it's very simple, and you know the conversation, and it goes like this. Do you love me? He says to Peter. Lord, you know I do. And then Jesus replies, well then, feed my sheep. And then he asks him again, do you really love me, Peter? Lord, you know I do. Well then, take care of my lambs. Tend my lambs. Do you really love me, Peter? Lord, of course, you know I love you. Then take care of my sheep. And with that one statement, a restored relationship occurs 3 times, once for each word of betrayal. And the relationship is restored. Jesus concludes that conversation then with 2 words. The same 2 words with which their relationship began. Well, Peter, then follow me. A second chance. And then he tells Peter, you know, it's so somber, but so empowering at the same time. He says, you know, you're used to going where you want to go, but the day is going to come, and you're going to be bound up and taken somewhere that you don't want to go. And John, the author of the text, points out at that point that Jesus is showing Peter in those moments how he's going to die. 2 men, in conclusion. 2 men. Both disciples, both witnesses of all the miracles, both betrayers, both die by violence, but the difference between them is very simple. Judas, when he realized that he was wrong, and had his opportunity for a second chance, took matters into his own hands. And he went back to the authorities and he tried to work it out on his own. Ever been there? Probably this year, 2018. And the result is that he dies by suicide because you can't work it out on your own. Peter, on the other hand, when he sees his opportunity for a second chance, he throws himself over the side. He dives into the grace and into the love of God, if you will, and he swims like a madman. He goes back to Jesus and he lets Jesus work it out for him. And he lives to see another day. How will we end? How will we end? And how we end, I mean, that's the question. How we end will depend on what we do with our second chances. How we end will depend on what we do with our second chances, because we all need, I mean, you know, it's a byword. I get it. Because there's lots of chances, lots of opportunities that we get. I use second chances because that's just common vernacular, right? We all get second chances. We get a lot of them. And how we end will determine not how we die, but how we live. Will depend on what we do with our second chances. Remember the professional public speaker? The one who, because of all the awkward moments in public speaking, should be in therapy now? He went on to say, my dad's church, where he had retired, my dad's church got a second chance. They had an opportunity to either relocate or reimagine the mission of their congregation. They chose not to. They chose to stay in place and build an educational facility almost the size of a city block. And that became their tombstone. Today, that place is closed. The telephone number has been turned off. Because when they had an opportunity to come back to Jesus, they tried to work it out on their own. 2 men, both betrayers, both died by violence. 2 men died, but at the same time, 1 man lives. With that, I'm just going to ask you to stand with me if you would. And I'm going to ask Craig if he would just put on some music. And I think through all of that and all of those many words, maybe something spoke to your heart, even like it did mine. And we have a wonderful opportunity today on this last Sunday of 2018 and how we will end. If you're in a position of needing a second chance, and this is just going to be between you and God. If there's some aspect of your life and you simply need another trip to the plate, and for you, if the choice is, do I work it out myself, or do I go back to Jesus and say, Lord, whatever it is, Lord, I can't work this out. I need you to reach out to me. I need you to restore this relationship between us. I need you to come into my life, and whatever it is, just for me, Lord, I need you to do something. I've tried. I can't work it out. I need a second chance. I'm turning this over to you. I'll swim to you, but you've got to take it from there. I'll throw myself out of the boat, but you've got to take it from there. I'll come to you and I'll answer any question that you have for every utterance, every act of betrayal, for every situation that is mandated that I need a second chance so that our relationship could be right and restored. I'll answer any question that you have to ask me, but you've got to take it from there. Because I don't have, on this last Sunday of 2018, anything to offer but surrender. And that's how we want to end our lives, in surrender. To open up the door for God to give us a second chance again and again and again as we come back to Him. So if you need a second chance today, take it. And like Peter, don't stay where you are in the boat. Take it. Don't let the way that you've been living, don't let the things that you've been doing become your tombstone. Because you've been trying to handle it on your own. And in your heart, you know that you can't. So rather than staying where you are, rather than staying in the boat, if you will, just as a group of believers, why don't you get out of the boat, and why don't we all just gather up here at the front, and let's have some faith together, and let's believe God for a relationship to be restored. Us with Him. Because we need a second chance. Would you come up here and would you pray and allow me to pray with you as the music is playing and your heart is open and you know that you need a second chance because there are things in your life that you've been trying to work out on your own, but they're just, you know that you can't work them out, but you can't give it up. You can't forfeit it. This is your opportunity to end. You may not get another second chance. This may be your last chance. Oh, I know I said earlier that you get as many second chances that you need, but one of those second chances is going to be your last second chance, and there's no guarantee that you'll ever get another one. And if you've broken fellowship with Christ in 2018 or any time before and you haven't repaired it, if it's not been restored, now's the time to do it. At the end of the year, how you end will determine what you do with those second chances that you have coming for the next year. Let's look ahead together as a community of faith. As Jesus, and I'm supposed to be down here with you, so don't, as Jesus called his disciples together, he said, come on, let's have some faith together in what God can do and not what I can do about my situation. And let's get this thing right. Would you do that? Would you pray as the music plays just softly? Would you pray in your own hearts? And then I'm going to offer, you know what it is. I'm going to offer a word of prayer for all of us, that the second chances that we are afforded by God's grace and His mercy in 2019, that we would take full advantage of those. And more each day, we would lean more fully on His grace and on His mercy, taking things back to Him and confessing, surrendering. I can't handle this. I'll throw myself into your love and grace, and I'll trust you in those moments to restore our relationship and to make things right. Two men, representative of all of us and what we do with our second chances. Judas, is that you? Or are you Peter in these moments? And that's a serious question. Which one will you be? Because the outcome is the same. Eternal life, 1,000,000 seconds with 1,000,001 seconds of grace and mercy. You can live forever, or you can die forever. And perhaps what we do right now, how we end this year, will determine that for you. Will determine your eternity. Take a moment. Examine your own heart between you and God. And I pray that you're like Peter. And in these moments, you simply dive out of the boat and into His grace and His love and His mercy and ask for His help and another opportunity to serve Him. Just examine your own heart in the quietness of the moment. It's okay to ask for another opportunity. It's okay to repent, to ask forgiveness. You know, you can stand here and you can let your heart and your mind just go blank. But you have this opportunity. Don't let it go by. Don't let it go by. If you feel like Jesus is asking you some questions, go ahead and be honest and answer those questions. He wants to restore that relationship, and sometimes that's how it happens. He knows where your heart is. He asks those questions for your sake, not for His. Do you love Him? Maybe He would ask. Oh Lord, you know I love you. Well, then follow me. Follow me. surrender to my strength. Now, Lord, I pray for this group of folks that have gathered here today, a community of faith. And I simply ask that our faith would grow. And that this would be a moment when we would recognize that it is the Lord that's working in our hearts. And that we would throw ourselves wholly on your grace and ask for your help in these moments, for another second chance as we end this year. Lord, may we surrender our hearts so that we can begin a new year fresh and new with you. Until we need another second chance. Lord, may we never close that door. May we never desire to stay in the boat, but always to get out of the boat to get to you, Lord. You're already there, waiting for us when we arrive. So that's where we're at today, God. You're here, you're speaking to hearts. And I pray that our hearts would be responsive like Peter's. And we would know that we're not too far from your reach. We can't go beyond your mercy. It extends in every area of our lives without end, every day. We can't escape it. So God, today, in surrender, we ask you one more time for your mercy to extend to us blessing instead of what we really deserve. Life instead of what we really deserve, which is death. That's what this is all about. And we can live in 2019 dead, or we can live a full and abundant life. And I pray that we do live, each one of us, a surrendered life to you that's alive in a restored relationship with you in the coming days. I pray that for everyone here. Lord, may our faith grow in the coming year. In Jesus' name, amen.